Hey everyone, and welcome to a new episode of He's Not Wrong, and I'm your host, Chad D. In today's bonus episode, I'm joined by AnneMarie Dolgetta, better known as the RootedRN, a functionally trained registered nurse and healthcare coach who has dedicated her work to helping people finally understand what their bodies have been trying to say. At a time when burnout, hormone imbalances, chronic fatigue, and stress-related illness have become the norm, AnneMarie is pushing back against a system that tells people that they're fine when they clearly aren't. She started her career at a high-risk pregnancy unit in New York City just months before the pandemic hit in 2020, where she saw firsthand how many women were struggling despite normal labs. That experience pushed her towards functional and integrative medicine, training with leading practitioners at The Well, Modern Age, and Remedy Place, and ultimately building her own concierge practice in Brooklyn called the Rooted RN. We discussed so much in the hour that I had with her, from stress, hormones, chronic illness, to what it really takes to move from surviving to healing in today's healthcare system. AnneMarie's work has been featured everywhere from Good Morning America to Time Magazine UK, but at its core, her mission is quite simple: to help people reconnect with their bodies and to get at the root of their health. So now, without further ado, I give you my conversation in this bonus episode with AnneMarie. AnneMarie, welcome to He's Not Wrong podcast. I'm so happy to have you here. Everyone has heard a really amazing introduction about you beforehand, so they know somewhat of your experience. But what I'm curious about is how Rooted RN got started. What led you to opening your own concierge clinic?
Yeah, it's been a journey, which is probably like the perfect comparison to a health journey. You never know, you don't really know how many twists and turns it's gonna take till you get to where you're trying to go, but they're all worth it. So actually I would say like five different major work experiences have all created the version of me and the practitioner that I am, that I felt confident enough to do, to kind of blend them all into what I want to do, which is offer tools of functional healing, which is root cause healing, to everybody to be able to experiment and play with and feel what feels right to them so that they can live their more optimized, best version of themselves in their day to day life. So I think I just gathered a ton of knowledge and experience through the several startups that I worked at in functional medicine, and even like my work early on after graduating, and working at New York Presbyterian while Cornell. I was working in high risk pregnancy, which is a lot to do with hormones and inflammation. And like nobody's really asking the questions like, why are so many women having a hard time with their pregnancies and they're otherwise seemingly healthy until they get pregnant, and then these issues sort of pop up. And that was like my first experience being like, no, what are we doing? Like, we need to ask different questions. So we're not getting so many people in this reactive state. And after leaving the hospital, it took me to my first functional medicine practice, which was a startup called The Well. And I learned a ton there from the health coaches there, the acupuncturists there, but mostly from the practitioners there, about how functional medicine works, so different from Western medicine. And then eventually that sort of evolved into two other wellness startups where I just acquired even more perspective and knowledge and worked with different practitioners. And I feel that I've really come into a deep understanding of the different lenses and tools there are for healing. And so that's sort of what I wanted to offer my patients in one-on-one, kind of like boutique consulting.
In your experience and everything that you've learned, why are so many things getting missed? I Pregnancy aside, and high risk pregnancies and issues with women popping up, but I feel like every time you turn on the news, you see a healthy kid on a football field just laid out because they had some kind of sudden cardiac arrest or whatever. It just seems to be things that we would associate some kind of negative medical history to, just seems to be popping up in seemingly healthy people. Why is it getting missed in so many places across the country?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so weird because we're at this place where technology is, soaring. We can do so much with AI. Like, there are so many AI tools and technology. Like, there's a different um wearable that you can wear for so many different things, for your temperature, for your heart rate. And for some reason, like, these chronic diseases or underlying diseases are going missed. And I think if you were boots on the ground in Western medicine clinics and hospitals, like, the technology they're using is from the 80s, like, straight up. Like, it is old school, and it's very algorithmic and it's very, you either fall into this niche bucket of people with, yes, this disease, or you're healthy and you're not worth really much longer than a 20-minute PCP visit, which we all know what that's like when you go to your PCP and you see them once a
Mhm.
year and you're like, why am I even here? Because everything I say is being like disregarded. Or like if I even dare to ask for a vitamin D level, they're like, why? Why would you need that? Or, no, you're healthy, you're fine. You don't have any issues. Why do we need to test that? So it's a completely different framework for how you approach patients. Like, are you looking to find um, patterns or dysregulations before they turn into a disease or they turn into a sudden acute, issue where someone's passing out? We didn't realize that they had this ongoing adrenal fatigue or ongoing hormone imbalance, whatever it is. And then I think if you factor in our environment now, like that's a whole huge beast that all of us are trying to tackle with our very old bodies. Like our evolution has kind of given us a lot of tools for one way of life. And now our life is very different. We have toxins in perfumes and mascara and also in our athletic wear. It's full of toxins and our body is constantly up against our modern world. And so I think a mixture of not using our tools the right way and preventatively for the masses, and then also not factoring in like how damaging our environment can be leaves us sort of in this like Swiss cheese effect where there's a lot of people falling through the cracks. And I think there's a lot we can do about it.
I feel like there's a phrase that we always hear, but there's never like a toolkit that's given to understand what that means. That's being an advocate for yourself when you're with your doctor. And I feel like that's such a scary thing. And people say if something doesn't sound right, advocate for yourself. And it's like, well,
Yes.
how exactly do I do that? Because I don't have a medical background. I'm just me. And you have
Yeah.
someone who's been in business for 20 plus years. What does advocating for yourself look like when you know, like you said, you're just being inundated with all of these toxins and all of these horrible elements, whether it's the water you're drinking, air you're breathing, food you're consuming. How can you be an advocate for yourself in those moments when you know that something might not be right?
A really great and really powerful question. And honestly, probably a much overlooked topic. I think, especially in America. I think that advocating for yourself, unfortunately, it's never going to be handed to you. It's not going to be taught to you because it's counterculture. It goes against, kind of the way the system is set up. Like the more that you don't know, the easier it is on the
Mm,
healthcare industry to like shove you along. I think that's a huge part of my mission is like I want to give you the tools and the understanding of everything that I've accumulated. No, you don't have to know like you don't have to know, lab values the way I do, or you don't have to know like doses the way that I'm in the weeds. I can do that for you. But what I can tell you and what functional medicine practitioners can empower you with is the knowledge of what's normal and what's not normal. And you need to trust your gut and to really listen to your gut before you listen to anyone in a white coat. And don't give your power away when you know something is true inside of you and you feel it in your bones and you're like, no, there's something off. I feel inflamed. I feel anxious all the time, or whatever those symptoms are that are really easily disregarded. I think look for alternatives. Don't feel like it's the end all when someone in a white coat says it's normal or says your labs are normal or there's nothing we do for this, or that autoimmune disease doesn't really have any cure, things like that. Don't buy into it because it's not true. um, there are tools out there, but it is sort of like you have to go looking and hunting a little bit. And I've kind of done the hunting. So someone like me who can be a liaison between that alternative world where you're like, I don't know, I get ads for vitamin C. Like, is that the solve? Like, what should I do? I don't know what I'm doing. Turn to someone like a health coach or someone who has been exposed to other options and see what resonates and move in that direction. Like, I think that's my biggest advice is don't don't take, something that doesn't resonate, um, and give up because odds are there are alternative solutions or other things you can try.
You just talked about trusting your gut and your gut instinct when something might not feel right. This doesn't have to really do with functional health, but more so your experience in your career. You went from a hospital nursing into functional medicine, and I'm wondering if you had this aha moment, this like clearly defined time where you look back at and you're like, okay, I have to make the jump from traditional medicine to functional medicine, and what that moment was. How did you know?
That's a great question. I will say, like, my definitely my whole life, I was interested in doing things, as I'll say, as naturally as possible. Like, I was introduced very early on. Like, I think in high school, I was working with a company called Beauty Counter. And I was working with them and I was working with doTERRA. And they were like some of the beginning sort of wellness companies, like coming up in like, like 2015, like
Yeah.
when wellness was like revving its engine. And I remember just being like, why isn't everyone using non-toxic makeup? Like, why would anyone put something that could cause cancer on your eyes? Like, I could not understand that. And I don't know, it never sat right with me. So I knew that I wanted to do something integrative. And then I think just being like true, like a very empathic and sort of like energetic, interested in spirituality. I just felt like there was a blend of science and energy work. Like I felt like there was a crux there. Like it couldn't just be like, yeah, some people just get cancer and they just do, and that's what it is. I never really understood why we weren't like trying to figure that out. And then I will say also in nursing school, when we would go through, research and case studies, and you would, let's say like you have a paper you're trying to write and you're trying to like for the sake of whatever you were assigned make an argument for some drug or some whatever. In every study it would be like, and then the placebo was like also 50% improved, and I would be like, why aren't we talking about the placebo? Like if something is working and there's no intervention, something is there. Like, I don't think it's worth disregarding like a placebo effect. Like that's crazy.
Yeah.
um so I think that was like what primed me. And then as I went into the medical field deeper, and then COVID hitting obviously at the like very beginning of my career, literally the year of my first job after graduating, I think I was just so turned off by the reactivity, the lack of prevention, um and just being on the like we're too late now end of like panicking in hospital settings and seeing the way that resources are utilized. It's very disheartening, and I think it just didn't align with me, but in a really good way, where I was able to very clearly see like with COVID especially, I was like, no, we can't keep doing this. We can't keep like burning the candle from both ends. We need to be acting proactively, let people get a chance to heal themselves or not go down the chronic pathway. And so, yeah, so I would say that was sort of the context that created the push.
How
If
was that working in the hospital setting in New York during COVID? What impact did that have on you? And I asked that because I was in Alabama all throughout COVID, and things were spaced out. You didn't really have to see people. It was such a different environment than what New York is, obviously, for many different reasons. But I cannot imagine being in a place like New York during the pandemic. But then to be working in that setting, what did that do to you?
you know, I say this not to like use this term lightly, but I genuinely do think there was some trauma there.
Yeah.
Um, as a new nurse. And, the beautiful thing about that was I am still to this day extremely close to my coworkers. That we all don't even really work on that unit anymore. But the way that New Yorkers had to come together and be on the same team is a feeling that I think is just so hard to describe and like so rare. So it was this really weird dichotomy of like we have to be one. We have to agree that we're not going to stand next to each other that close on the subway or sit that close to each other on the subway. And also, is the subway even safe to ride right now? We all felt like collectively we had to work together, and also be so separate. Like we also like thankfully the hospital that I worked at happened to open right before the pandemic and was the only high risk unit that had separate rooms. Other
Mm.
hospitals have patients sharing rooms. That's very normal for New York City. So it's a very interesting thing. You would think just having a room would be like a normal thing, but in New York, that's not a given. And so for our unit to have separate rooms so that if we had pregnant patients that had COVID, we could separate them was like a huge advantage. And yeah, I mean, seeing women who were pregnant and maybe had other comorbidities and then also having COVID run numbers like with their oxidation being in like the 80s is crazy because not only do you see the mom but you see how it reflects in the baby, like in utero you can see how their heart rate is struggling because it's not getting enough oxygen.
Yeah.
So it was, it was crazy. You had to be very adaptable, you had to be a team player, you had to be on the same page, and you also had to find community and connection anywhere you could because a lot of our patients' husbands weren't allowed to be next to them in some of these like traumatizing moments of their lives or really important moments of their pregnancy. They were alone, or like the only visitor that they had was their mom, and they were only allowed to pick one visitor. And so we could, try to keep things at bay. You could only have one visitor, and it had to remain the same visitor the whole stay. And that's so hard. You're trying to really like create comfort and safety in the worst possible circumstances for some of these patients. So it was crazy, but I think the lasting impact is just it's going to echo for a really long time, and hopefully all the good ways where we have the ability to create light in the darkest times, and also like really ask ourselves like what are we doing to prevent these things from happening. And like I think there was a surge of wellness after COVID. So yeah, long-winded way of saying traumatic but good, uh enlightening, very multifaceted, crazy. Wouldn't go back.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. There was like a moment during the pandemic that I felt hopeful that people were realizing, oh, I'm working too much. I'm burning the candle from both ends. Like, take a step back, enjoy life, spend time with family and loved ones. But since then, it feels like we've gotten back to this place where people are burning themselves out and we're really focused on work.
Totally.
The political environment we're in is stressful enough on top of people having to decide what to pay for or what they can afford. Um, and I say that because all of these things, that stress from work, from life, from finances, the burnout, the anxiety that you feel from all of that, it has effects on your body. And my experience with that goes all the way back to college. This is like circa 2013. At the start of my first college semester, I was blood was coming out from both ends for me because my stomach pains were so bad.
Okay.
And I would go to the ER and they just put me on morphine. They wouldn't they do a some kind of scan. Everything will look fine. But I would be in excruciating pain, like knife in my abdomen, twisting, like hunched over, throwing up blood. It was horrible, and it would happen, like, once a week, like clockwork, and so finally, like, 6 months later, um, they were like, "We're gonna do an the
Endoscopy.
endoscopy?" Yeah, endoscopy and a colonoscopy pretty much at the same time, and we're just gonna look at everything and meet in the middle, essentially,
Okay.
and they did that because 'cause they're like, "Maybe it's a cancer that we're not seeing or testing for or something because that's the only thing."
Mhm.
Nothing was found. Everything was fine. I was told I was fine. I'm like, I'm not fine. I'm truly not fine. Like, I'm literally throwing up blood. I'm in so much pain. And
Right.
turns out, finally, a doctor said, well, maybe it's just stress related. So because of that, I took a semester off of college and like it went it went away. And
Oh
I
my
say
god.
that story because the stat from the CDC is 60% of Americans live with at least one chronic condition. And for me, my stress, my anxiety, all the way back then, and even to today, it's not as extreme, but it manifests in like very severe bodily pain. And it, it's horrible. And I'm wondering, in your patients that you see, and when people come to you, how are those effects manifesting in people? And what, in my situation, what would you tell me to do?
That's a great question. I would say that some degree of burnout is running rampant, undiagnosed, um, in a majority of young adults or, anyone working and living in a city. I mean, and stress, what I've learned about stress is there's physical stress, mental stress, and sort of like energetic stress. Like I feel like stress, you could test cortisol levels, and that's one thing. Um, but you could also have emotional stress, and that's going to send signals to your body in such a profound way. And it might not show up just as high cortisol, it might show up as hair thinning, it might show up as changes in vision, it might show up as night sweats, it might show up as an ability to lose weight right around the belly button. Stress manifests in so many small ways. And the biggest theme with the body is that it will whisper until it will scream. And if you don't hear the message when it's a whisper, it will get louder, until it's like a situation that you were in where your body had no way to communicate with you in a way that I guess that you could understand that it was experiencing extreme stress. And what I like to do with patients is I like to ask every single person, I ask a series of questions. And I think that's another big difference with functional medicine in general. It's just you want to hear a really well-rounded assessment. You want to spend like 30 to 45 minutes talking about your whole story. And I usually ask patients on a scale of 1 to 10, what would you rate your stress? And not related to anybody else and not related to a past version of you, just in a vacuum. How would you say that you perceive your stress out of 10? And most people say like an 8, 9, 10. And then what happens too, I think that's interesting, is people will look at me and be like, I'm really not stressed. I don't know. It's like a 5. I'm like, okay. And then we go into some of the physical symptoms, like, are you waking up at 4 a.m. or 3 a.m.? Okay, yes. Are you having chronic bloating and gas? Do you have brain fog? Are you getting sick frequently? Are you leaning towards a little bit of constipation? Is your hair thinning? Do you feel on edge when you're on the subway? Like, would you resonate with saying that you generally kind of feel on edge? Like, do you feel like loud noises can be triggering or bright lights kind of hurt your eyes? These are all quiet ways of seeing stress manifest physically. And when you start tallying those can be like a 10. So sometimes people's mental stress resilience can be very strong, but it doesn't mean that their body is not feeling it. And
Yeah.
so I think it's important to assess those small and sometimes large symptoms and don't discount them. It will get louder if you don't listen. So I would say, for your example, I would ask you about, what your stress level is and what some of those other symptoms might be that maybe you've been ignoring or never really paid attention to, and help us really assess like where you're at with stress. And stress is also hormonal. It can be for women. If your insulin is all over the place, or you're having mood swings, you're not eating breakfast or a high protein breakfast, you're waiting till 2 o'clock to eat, but you had an oat milk latte for breakfast and your blood sugar's all over the place. That is perceived as a stress signal to the body. And so your cortisol will mimic that insulin roller coaster, and your cortisol will be all over the place. So sometimes that's where you have the 3 a.m. wake up or the 3 p.m. crash. Um, so I don't know if you have any particular symptoms that you would add in there that you heard that maybe resonated.
Like
But then,
all of them. I'm like, yeah, check
yeah,
that one and that one too, and that one. Yep, add that one to the list. Okay, Looks like I
Yeah,
need to go on vacation for about a month.
right. Yeah, so so yeah, so what I like to do is I always tell people it's not a bad thing that you're stressed. It's not a bad thing that you need a coffee to get through your day. It's just telling us that your body is asking for help. And that's kind of the beauty of a lot of the tools that I use in my clinic, like B12, for example, B complex B12, and what else? I have all these fun little things. Just B12 and B complex. Those alone are like huge refills to your energy tank. Like that is going to make the difference of you running on fumes versus you having a full tank and being able to step on the gas and hit 80 miles per hour on the highway and have no issues and not have to get an oil change like every year.
Mm,
Um, so it's very similar, like to I think of it like an energy wallet, or you could compare it to like a car. Um, but your energy wallet, everyone has a finite amount of energy that they can spend in whatever way they want. And to think that, in this modern life that you should be able to answer every call to action and not need a recharge it doesn't make sense. So most patients that are going through stress to any degree who resonate with 1 to 100% of all of the symptoms we just talked about could probably use some support and basically like a big deposit into their energy bank account. And that's what a lot of like taking a multivitamin, it sounds silly, but that's a daily contrast to you pulling out of your energy wallet. We're putting stuff into it. And we want to keep you in like a place of balance. And everyone has a different state of balance for, what feels normal to them, but also, depending on what's going on in their life. So for you, like I would say, if you resonate with a lot of those symptoms, you probably need some really heavy hitters in your physical body just to send your nervous system the message, hey, you actually have the tools you need to do these cellular functions. Like getting hydration alone puts you into a rest and digest. Like, okay, cool. We have a nutrient. We have something we need to do a job. Like it gives your nervous system that reassurance to do the job you want to do. And that's a lot of what I'm doing is bridging the gap of your body wants to heal. What is it asking for? And where can we fill the gaps in your foundation? And then the other side of that is assessing not just what you're missing, but what you're being overexposed to. So you want to pull out what you're being overexposed to that your body is like, we don't like this, whether that's gluten, whether that's New York City noise, whether it's toxins in your detergent that are making you get eczema flares, whatever it is, pulling those out and putting in the good guys so you can do what you need to do and not be fighting a constant uphill battle.
what
So,
a
yeah,
what a concept, thinking of health as like something we can be proactive on and not have to just
right.
be reactionary to it. Like, wow, okay. So to stay on the line of like some practical application, another thing that I get are really bad migraines, and I've
Okay.
always had them. I've I've gone to see doctors. I've been on the migraine medicines. Really, the only thing that I can seems to bring me relief is like a Benadryl in a dark room and chugging a lot of water. There's never really been an answer to my migraines. So if I came to you with that,
Yeah.
how would you help me get to the root of what is causing the migraines that happen like on a weekly basis?
Yeah. So sometimes what I like to do is start with the obvious, I'm going to use a corporate term, low hanging fruit, like just the basic nutrients that could be contributing, like likely factors. So like for example, a really hot topic I feel like right now that people are starting to get more used to hearing about is magnesium. Have you heard of
Yeah,
that or used that before?
I
Yeah.
have.
So magnesium is really interesting because it's super simple. It's literally a mineral. It's not, some drug. It's a nervous system relaxer. It coats your nervous system lining. It helps things fire more appropriately. It's a muscle relaxer, and it is severely lacking in our fruits and vegetables that should be getting it from soil. But the way that farming works in America, our soil is very nutrient depleted. Basically, over years, we plant things. They get some nutrients from the soil, but we never replace the nutrients. So now, as time has gone
Mm,
on, we've never actually repleted the soil with the nutrients to go into our fruits and vegetables. So most people are not getting the magnesium that they were supposed to be getting from just normal diet. And that can make a huge difference. So just adding in at night, even in the morning, if you like, there's a bunch of different types of magnesium. My favorite is magnesium glycinate. It's like the most neutral, but highly absorbed. And I would just, first of all, add that in because that's sort of a foundational element anyway. That's something that's just going to help again with stress. We burn through magnesium when we're super stressed. And it's going to help with just if you get muscle cramps ever with working out, it's really good for that. For women with period cramps, really good for that. People with migraines or chronic headaches, really good for that. High blood pressure can bring that down. It's amazing. So that's sort of like the first obvious thing I would start with is adding in a magnesium. The next thing I would consider is something called NAD. That is a really interesting sort of like a peptide. It's kind of also a
Yeah.
hot topic that people are talking about. And I have seen that do really wild things for patients from improving their vision within 10 minutes of getting their NAD injection, um, to making their chronic migraines disappear, to helping with withdrawals from Wellbutrin or other mental health meds, like whatever meds you're on, anything to do with the
Hmm.
brain. NAD is very anti-inflammatory for the brain, and it's really cool. So I would probably suggest to try something like that. And you don't have to do them. You don't have to do that forever, but it might just be enough to help something kind of go from a pattern of inflammation to go to a more dormant state, whatever could be causing your chronic migraines or headaches. So I would suggest trying that. When things don't work, it's not a bad thing. It just means that we have to dig a little deeper. And so sometimes you can go into really cool testing. There's all sorts of tests that you can do in functional medicine to try to figure out the root cause that, you know, it's like car engines, kind of like you hear a noise or something, your windshield wiper fluid isn't working, but you go there and it looks fine. So then you're like, okay, well, trace that down. What is it connected to? Okay, trace that down. Okay. Oh, it's because this random thing wasn't working. And that's why this isn't working. And the body is very similar. So yeah, so then I would just go down kind of the next steps with you to see, plug and play and see what works.
And so that leads me into my next question because that was so simple and so easy to even just get started on getting to the root cause of a migraine. And this might be opinion based, it might be rooted in a lot of fact. So I'm going to ask you, and you just answer how you want. Is our healthcare system in its current state designed to fail us? I'm talking big pharma, insurance companies, the way the insurance companies target us with their marketing for ads, the way that they're looped in with the hospitals. Like,
It's a great
answer how
question.
you will.
I think that Western medicine in its current state can be really helpful for traumatic injuries, the ER, elective surgeries, the intense, like worst case scenario, like someone's, in the OR. It's very good at that. It's very good at band-aiding that. Beyond that, it is not designed because it is not profitable for people to heal. That doesn't drive revenue for pharma, insurance, hospitals. If people don't need you, that doesn't drive a profit. So, what's their incentive? What is the incentive for pharma or insurance or hospitals to have you feeling better? There is not one. There just isn't. And then I think on top of that, I think doctors are amazing. I have nothing against doctors or practitioners in Western
Yeah.
medicine. I just think that there's no bridge for, like, your example is perfect. It's like you're not in an acute situation, you don't need surgery, you're not in the ER, but you have migraines. That's something we can't ignore. So why aren't there more solutions? And they just haven't been trained or exposed to any of those modalities. Again, maybe because if it's not profitable, maybe just because it's out of date. Um, I think that if some Western medicine doctors are open to exploring that, and some of them have, and sort of have become more integrative, then like you could do both. Why not do both? That's great. But you definitely can't just stick with Western medicine if you're not in an emergent situation. You're not going to be set up for success.
Are there any signs that functional healing is making its way into Western medicine? Or is it just like there's just a what's being done to bridge that gap? Or is it just like there's a gap and it's up to people
It's a
like you to fill it?
So it's really cool. Like I will say, so like for example, like NYU, even Cornell, or even like the hospital I worked at in Atlanta, if you see like a dog on the unit and they're like the emotional support dog, like that is sort of like a integrative approach. Like that's kind of your like anti-stress. Like we know it's really soothing for like people's heart rates come down when they're feeling relaxed and they're petting a dog. Like great, that's like a start. And then some hospitals are integrating acupuncturists, which is really cool. So Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese medicine practitioners who can use Chinese medicine modalities to bring balance and harmony and like decrease pain to patients that are in the hospital. That's something that I've seen happen at least in New York City. Um, and then for pain, I think that pain is very interesting. Pain, because it just is such a beast, and so many people don't want to go down the oxycodone and high intense pain drug route. They're looking for other modalities, and so there have been some really interesting things happen with that, like even like essential oil patches I've seen passed out to patients who are in pain, or what else? There's actually therapeutic communication has been studied for nurses to be able to bring down pain levels just by identifying or letting the patient talk about what was going on with them can bring down pain levels. So it's starting, but like, for example, then like if a patient is experiencing some sort of like toxic burden or um, severe inflammation, no Western medicine doctor that I've met in a hospital would ever say, oh, like, and add on like 500 milligrams of glutathione, which is like the number one antioxidant, anti-inflammatory liver detoxer that our bodies make. That would never be a tool that they use, but I don't know why. Like, why wouldn't you pair that with your other modalities? Like, it can't hurt. It's just something that we all naturally make, and like that would probably help bring down some inflammation. But you don't see anything like that. So there's some, but generally, if you're a person who is seeing a functional medicine doctor and you have a PCP or an internist, and you see both, but you kind of don't want to tell them about each other. If you were to tell your PCP what you're doing with your functional medicine doctor, most likely you will be scoffed at or told that it's nonsense or told that it's irrelevant, whatever. And you'll be left questioning your decisions and your intuition and your gut and the progress that you've made, maybe with the functional doctor. And so I would just keep, caution that just be aware. Right now, there is a little bit of uh, oil and water going on. And you really, again, need to be the advocate for yourself to listen to and do what feels right to you.
There's a lot that I'm seeing with healthcare organizations, like for instance with the American Heart Association. They're starting to get, I believe it's a version of functional medicine, but they're starting to get into that space of preventative healthcare
Mhm.
by investing a lot of money into programs like food as medicine, for
Mhm.
instance, and pretty much saying that a lot of the things that we're treating people for, a lot of the heart conditions that people have, a lot of the things that lead to heart disease and heart attack and stroke can be prevented if you use food as medicine, if you have a healthy diet and all these things. And so it makes me happy hearing what you're saying about the small changes that are happening. And it also makes me happy that the healthcare organizations that have a major push and policy making are also getting behind things that would be healing for and preventative, so you don't have to just rely on what I have in the notes as sick care,
Right.
and just being treated for something, and you can actually prevent yourself from having to go through that experience. And so that is awesome. So it's my understanding that functional medicine looks very deeply at gut health. And I've seen it on TikTok, I've seen it on Facebook, I've seen it literally everywhere that your
Mhm.
health and your immune system, all of it is really like intimately connected with your gut health. And I do not understand that. That does
Yeah.
not make sense to me. Can you explain that to me in a way that like I'm gonna get it because no one on TikTok has yet to successfully do it.
I'm so excited. This is such a great question and so empowering once you have a handle on this. So I'm really excited. Okay. I would say this would be a good time to pull up one of those pictures if you wanted to. In this visual, it helps you understand the mechanical connection between the brain and the gut. So, the reason that functional medicine really looks at the gut is because it kind of sees the gut as like your first brain before your brain. Um, it is the center of your immune system, and it actually also makes neurotransmitters like serotonin and norepinephrine and dopamine. And it's usually, if this is not happy, nothing else is happy. And so I'll explain why that is. Um, think of your gut like a garden, and picture a garden, and it has soil maybe, and what you want in a garden, like picture like the botanical gardens. You want things to be like kind of put in the right place. You want there to be like some fencing around like certain, flower beds. You want it to be clean. You don't want any weeds. Um, and you want all sorts of different types of flowers. You want like huge biodiversity of flowers. You want it to have all sorts of fun things, but mostly good guys, not really any bad guys, like not a lot of weeds, and you want it to be nice and put in place. You don't want soil kind of falling out where it's not supposed to be. It should be pretty tight, tightly knit. That is what the ideal gut would look like. So we want the lining to be nice and tidy. We don't want any breaks in the lining. We don't want things coming out of the gut and going into the bloodstream and going into the nervous system and telling the rest of the body that there's trouble in paradise. We want a nice, clean, very diverse with all different types of good bacteria gut. That will set you up for a strong immune system and a clear brain. Like you won't have brain fog. You won't have like a low grade inflammation. So the reason that is because our gut lining is one cell thick, which is really, really, really small. So it's very easy to make a break in our gut lining. And when that happens, usually it's because we eat something that had maybe something our body didn't agree with, or something kind of toxic, whatever. Like processed foods are really good at this. Whatever foods that we eat that kind of break that lining. Now, anything that our immune system or our intestines would have been able to deal with sort of at the source is now leaking out into other parts of our bloodstream. And we have a nerve called the vagus nerve going from the brainstem all the way down to the gut. And it intertwines with our blood vessels and with our gut lining. And it kind of receives messages from that like big source. If things are pouring out and we're eating foods that are inflammatory, like gluten tends to be for most Americans, it doesn't really matter if you're gluten sensitive or not, because the structure of gluten is just so unrecognizable by our immune system. It kind of sends signals of danger to our immune system, and it sort of revs up that engine, our immune system's response. So you're, let's say, eating a lot of gluten, you're not eating a lot of fiber, so you have a lot of weeds, a lot of bad guys, and you've got not a lot of good guys that are able to handle it. And you also have a break in your lining, and now all of the messages about how bad the garden looks is going out to the rest of the body, including the immune system and including the brain. And now everyone's panicking. All the cells and all the messages being sent are we're inflamed or something is wrong. And so that's what can create low grade inflammation and cause things like eczema, rosacea, autoimmune conditions, brain fog, lack of memory, lack of focus, trouble sleeping. So when we clean up the gut, a lot of inflammatory type symptoms, even like migraines, anything that kind of tells us inflammation is happening, like our immune system is upset about something, or something is here that doesn't belong here, or we don't have enough of the good things. Those are kind of like what inflammation can correspond to. Um, when those signals are going off nonstop, you're going to see it in some manifestation. And it could be different for everybody. For some people, it's loose stools. For some people, it's joint pain. And so when you clean up the gut, a lot of those symptoms self-correct. And so that's why in functional medicine, if we clean this up and make it a really nice garden, and this is working properly, and there's not this like constant inflammation signal being sent, we can actually see what's going on. So if we clean up the gut and you're still having migraines, then we know, okay, it's this is good, this is working. This is great. All your other symptoms resolved. You're feeling less stressed, you're sleeping better, but you're still having migraines. Okay, so we need to add in maybe something else, or we can test for some virus maybe that's been low lying and brought to the surface for whatever reason. So that is kind of why we started the gut. We want to clean that up and make sure that the nerves and the blood vessels are not being contaminated with things that don't belong outside of the gut and aren't creating sort of like an inflammation cycle. I hope that makes sense.
And all of it makes sense. And now my brain's starting to go, okay, so I know I need to clean up my gut. How do I do that? I'm thinking, how long does it take? How do I do that? How do I do it without breaking the bank? How do I know that it's working?
Great questions. So there's a few things that you can do depending on the severity. Usually people with like a pretty severe case of gut dysbiosis, which is, think of it as a pretty nasty garden.
Yeah.
The bacteria is not in good balance. You might have leaky gut, which is again when that cell lining is disrupted and things are falling out of your garden bed. Um, you will have like gas and bloating with every meal. You will feel like you might have indigestion. You might have irregular bowel movements, which could be either too many or too loose, or it could be, only a few a week. And generally, you want to have a bowel movement with every meal. About like for every time you eat, you should probably have a bowel movement. You just want it to be firm, not too firm, not too soft, just comfortable. And that's sort of a healthy sign of like things moving along. So usually, based on those symptoms. Depending on how severe the case is, some people get to the point where they start to develop food allergies, which is when your immune system is so inflamed and so upset that it starts to attack all sorts of things. Maybe eggs, that could be a common one, or again, gluten can be kind of inflammatory. So depending on the severity, if you're someone who just feels a little bloated here and there, but you have pretty regular bowel movements, you might not have to hit the gas fully on a full like elimination diet, for example. But you might want to go ahead and start something like L-glutamine, which is a really nice amino acid that seals up that lining. So if you're eating really healthy, but you're still feeling bloated, you don't know why, you might have a little bit of leaky gut, start with L-glutamine. Add that in. It's a powder. That's such an easy, no risk way of sealing up your gut lining. And then if things still aren't resolving, go a step deeper. You might want to eliminate. So the elimination diet is something where you eat pretty much like a paleo diet for, they say like 6 weeks. I say try to get at least 4 because not everybody is able to do up to 6. Do what you can. But if you can eliminate aggravating foods for a few weeks, it kind of gives your system a reset and it can help calm things down. And then you can slowly introduce maybe some of those foods that you're not sure if you're sensitive to and see how your body responds. And when you take them away and reintroduce them, you're able to see a big contrast of, oh, okay, my body really didn't like that. I got really bloated after I ate that. Or, okay, this was fine. This is not the problem. We're good. And so you can identify maybe some of the perpetrators that are making the situation worse and remove them. And then you can do some gut restoration. So that would look like eating lots of fiber, getting your prebiotics and probiotics, and you're really just planting seeds of like daisies, roses, all the different flowers. You're getting all that biodiversity in there to strengthen your gut. And so you're not just pulling the weeds out, but you're actually replacing them as well. So
Like all of that seems so simple. It's so easy. Why are we overlooking that so much?
I think because it's just not talked about. I think it might just be a matter of empowering people with education and tools. And yeah, this is not something that Western medicine prioritizes. And I think that's all it is.
So you've built an incredible toolbox of healing in your business. And I'm curious, how do you decide what someone actually needs, whether it's IV therapy, acupuncture, going more of a Western medicine route, if it's something as simple as changing a diet? How do you decide that in your toolbox? And how is this toolbox built?
I love that. I love that question. I find that, and I think this is the power of being a nurse or even like a nurse practitioner. I think just when you have interacted with so many people, you're blessed with this. You develop a really strong skill set in listening and in trusting your gut. I use a little mix of really listening to people and asking questions and really like going down the rabbit hole of like, okay, so wait, when did that start? Okay, so like for you, for example, like when you kind of pointed to, I think 2013 is when
Mhm.
you had some issues starting. So usually, like in Western medicine, this would never be a conversation. But with me, it has to be because let's say that your GI symptoms came up right after a breakup or right after you failed an exam and it like really was a pivotal moment in your life for you. You can't ignore the emotional and nervous system impact because the nervous system reflects in the immune system. I think that those two are like mirrors.
Yeah.
And so I think that you have to take that into account. And so that's part of the history is like, okay, trying to really get a sense of like, okay, where does it sound like? And people, this is what's also amazing. When you give people the space to talk about themselves and really reflect like with someone, like kind of as a coach, like not where you're like answering their questions, you're more like guiding them through their own answers. They start to put the pieces together on their own and they're sort of like, oh, well, actually, yeah, that is when I started to feel bloated like right around that trip to Asia. And then I'm like, oh, okay. And then what happened? Okay, and then what happened? Okay, so you might have a parasite. And so I try to let them go through their journey, ask the right questions, to try to put puzzle pieces together. Then, as you sort of start to see the puzzle come together, you can see like, okay, so this doesn't make sense. So let's maybe do parasite testing and let's do a stool test and see what happens. Or like, no, that sounds like hormones. Like that sounds like that's your main issue. So let's go down there. And then you can offer what anyone's open to. So like, for example, I've seen patients that were infertile, could not get pregnant, were very stressed, even had a hard time like starting a cycle. Like let's say they hadn't had a period in, months.
Yeah.
With a mix of diet supplement recommendations, you can nourish the body, give it what it needs. And then if you layer on top of that other modalities like acupuncture, which is amazing for moving stagnant energy through meridian points, you get this like even more powerful impact with the way supplements work because they work better. They don't have an uphill battle. And their sleep is that much better because they don't have an uphill battle because their energy is moving in coordination with the magnesium. So these like layering techniques can make things work quicker and more effectively and can give you the result of which I have seen before patients getting pregnant within 6 months. It's crazy. I have thankfully worked with amazing practitioners because I've worked in enough startups that sort of wanted to be like a one-stop shop, like have
Yeah.
everything in one building. And so I was able to kind of like cross-reference, like, hey, my patient's seeing you on Thursday. Like, what are you planning to do? Okay, so what should I do? Okay, sounds good. So let's see if maybe like my glutathione for detox and your liver cheese stagnation treatment in Chinese medicine can pair together and help them like flush this thing out. And patients' intuition is also, I think, equally important. If I mention something to a patient, like, have you ever heard of acupuncture? And they're like, you know what? I was just Googling it and I just think that's so interesting. I was just thinking about that. I'm like, okay. So I don't think that that's a coincidence. I think trust your gut. I think go for it because it might resonate with you and it might be the tool that really works for you. And everyone is just so different. And so I would say, and I've done this for myself, trying more modalities to see what really works and hits home for you is part of the process. And that's how I developed my toolboxes because I've tried all of this. I've tried everything, I feel like, under the sun. Um, and some things resonate and some things, maybe don't make the biggest impact, but you don't know until you try.
One thing that I've heard that you have said is that your tools or the tools that you need will find you when you're ready. And I want to know what you mean by that. And
I
I feel
think
like I
that
know the answer because I feel like my tools have just like found me by way of he's not wrong, but I'll let you go ahead and answer.
So I think that, life has a serendipitous like character to it. And I think that when you're ready or open to a next step in your heart, or you kind of plant that seed within you that you're like, no, there's gotta be something else. I think that the universe or your subconscious sort of leads you to that next step. And I
Mm.
think it leads you to the step that you're ready for. Because I think that for some people who maybe have never heard of functional medicine and are maybe curious about it now, I think that if you tried to present them with emotion code right off the bat, I think that's a really big jump. I think first you might want to test the waters with maybe like vitamin D, see how that goes. Maybe it makes a difference, maybe it doesn't. So I think that in your life, if you just trust and follow that next step, it might not be the last step, but I think it's the next best step that is going to feel right to you and prepare you for the one after that. And so I think if you feel ready or inclined or open, start asking the universe to show you like what the next step might be, or ask yourself, what feels like it resonates the most. Like I don't know, I'm just gonna go get a B12 shot. It's $50. Let me just see how it goes. And then that whole week you have a bunch of energy and you're like, oh, okay, this works. And then all of a sudden now you have a different perspective because you're like, I feel more like myself than I have in years. And like, wow, maybe my iron is low. And like, let me figure that out. And it gets you that little bit closer to like your original self. And I think the right tools, are there for you to try when they call you. And I think don't feel like it needs to be the answer. I think they all work in harmony. And I think um, just taking the next best step is like the best thing to do.
So Anne-Marie, what is it that you are not wrong about?
I am not wrong that the liver is the best organ that we have. I love it. I'm obsessed with the liver. I just love her.
You're gonna have to give context. I can't just end on that.
I love her. She's your filtration system. She's your Dyson air purifier's filter. And if she's not working, nothing else is going to work. So I just love the liver, and I just love her. And I just think that if you're struggling with anything, support your liver and things can just go up from there.
Wow. Okay, so I need to put respect on my liver's name. Noted.
Yes,
Need to
we
pay more
love her.
attention to
You feel
it.
the only one.
Well, Anne-Marie, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you coming on He's Not Wrong and sharing all of this wonderful information with my audience. I am very appreciative for it and for your time. And I just can't say thank you enough.
I'm so grateful to be here and to get to spread some tools for people to use. That is like my mission. So thank you for letting me live in alignment with that.